Daf Ayin Beis Amud Aleph. We'll begin Daf Ayin Aleph Amud Beis, the fifth line of the Mishnah. Holding in the middle of the Mishnah, the fifth line of the Mishnah. We learned in the range of the Mishnah that a Korban Pesach that was shechted Shaloi Lishmai on Shabbos, since the Korban is possible, Pesach has to be shechted Lishmai, did Lishloi Shmai, the Korban is possible, so therefore he's Machal Shabbos. He did Shchita, Shaloi B'Makam Mitzvah, and he's Chayv Chatas. Sharkol is welcome to Shach L'Shem Pesach. Other korbanos that you shecht for Korban Pesach, im ein ru'im b'chayim. If the korbanos, the animals, are not roy for the Korban Pesach, then you're chayim because it's an obvious mistake. So he's chayim. He's considered Machal Shabbos. But if they're ru'in, we had a machlokes Rebbe Lezer is Machayv Chatas or Yeshua Paiter. Then we had a machlokes. So the basis of the machlokes, as we learned previously, was that whether we consider it toy b'dvar mitzvah, do we say that he's considered toy b'dvar mitzvah and he should be potter or not? So if he shechted a Pesach shaloi lishma, the Pesach is possible. The Korban is possible. He shechted it shaloi lishma, the Korban is possible. He's not being Isaac in a mitzvah. He's not doing any mitzvah, so he's chayv chatas. If he shechs another korban for a Korban Pesach, if it's obvious that this animal is not roy for a Korban Pesach, if it's a female, if it's more than a year old, it's obvious it's not roy for the Korban Pesach, we can't consider this toy b'dvar mitzvah, so he's chayv. But the machlokes is if he shechs other korbanos for a Korban Pesach. If he shechs another korban, now Shabbos he's not allowed to do this. If he's other korbanos that he shechs l'shem Pesach, then they're not deicha Shabbos. But they have a din, according to Rabbi Yeshua, it has a din of a shlomim. So now, even though there's no heter to shech this on Shabbos, but according to Rabbi Yeshua, we still consider it to be toy b'dvar mitzvah because he was preoccupied with doing a mitzvah, and in fact, he did a mitzvah of sorts. He's also for him to do that, but he did a mitzvah of sorts. It is a kosher shlomim. So Rabbi Yeshua says he's considered toy b'dvar mitzvah, mistaken while preoccupied in a mitzvah. He's not chayv chatas. Rabbi Lezer says no, he's chayv chatas. He's considered to be a shogeg, and he has to bring a korban. So that's machlokes. So this is where we're holding. So now we're analyzing this machlokes. So Amr Loi, Rabbi Lezer said to Rabbi Yeshua, Ma ima Pesach shel mutar lishma. A Pesach that you shech l'shem Pesach. It's mutar on Shabbos. The Torah says you bring it on Shabbos, but nevertheless, Kashina as Shmai Chayav. But if you shechted it for a different korban, like we learned in the ratio, the very first din, you're Chayav. Zvachim Shein Asron Lishma. Other korbanas, you're not allowed to bring it on Shabbos. For instance, the Shlomim, you're not allowed to bring it on Shabbos. So you're not even allowed to bring it Lishma. Kishashina adds Shma ain't a din she'echayev. If you change it and redesignate it, you designate it for something else, then for something that is not their korban. So, for instance, you brought a shlomim and you did it l'shem Pesach. Certainly, it should be that we should say he should be chayev achatas for that. Amar Rabbi Yeshua, no, you can't compare it. Amar b'Pesach sheshina v'davar also. The case of Pesach, we're talking where he shechted the Korban Pesach for something else. He did it with something which is also to do it on Shabbos, to a Korban which is also on Shabbos. But when he shechted the other Korban, let's say the Shlomim, for instance, the Shlom for a Pesach, he's shechting it for a Korban that you're allowed to bring on Shabbos. The Pesach you're allowed to bring on Shabbos, so Yeshina for something which is mutar on Shabbos. So therefore, you can't compare it. Amr Rabbi Lezer, he says, a murit tzibur yechichu. Well, a korban tzibur will be mechiach. I'll ask you a question from korban tzibur. So, for instance, on the Tomid, you have the korban Tomid, which is deicha Shabbos, and the Musafim, which are deicha Shabbos. Shehein mutarim lishma. They're mutar if you bring it for their purpose for lishman. It's mutar. It's deicha Shabbos. But if someone who shechs other korbanos for a Talmud or for a Musaf, he's chayiv. We don't consider it Tayyib Dvar Mitzvah, and he's chayiv v'chatas. Amar l'Rei Yeshua Yeshua Stem Loi. Can't bring me a ride from there. Over there, we don't consider it to be Tayyib Dvar Mitzvah. I agree with you over there that he's chayiv v'chatas, because over there it's Yeshlam Kitzvah. It's only a very limited amount. You bring a Talmud in the morning, Talmud in the afternoon. You bring a Korban Musaf, it's a very limited amount. So to say that the person should be considered honest, he's Tayyib Dvar Mitzvah, he's preoccupied with the Mitzvah, and he's considered an honest, we wouldn't say that because he's considered negligent. He should have known. He should have known that this is not the valid for a Talmud, that they were already makriv the Talmud, that they were makriv the Musaf. But Pesach shein lo kitzvah. But Pesach shein lo kitzvah. Everyone is bringing a korban Pesach. There's a multitude of korban Pesach. Over there, we can legitimately say that the person that was shechted this other korban for a Pesach, he made a mistake, and because he was Tayyib Dvar Mitzvah, because there's so many korbanos Pesach that you have to be makriv. So it's a mistake, which we can say is a legitimate mistake, that is as a result of his being preoccupied with the Dvar Mitzvah, and he's considered an honest, and he's not chayiv a korban. So that's Machlokes Rabbi Eliezer and Yeshua. Now the Gemara brings down another shita. Rabbi Meir Omer, the Mishnah rather brings down another shita. Rabbi Meir Omer, Af HaSheicha L'Shem Imur Tzibur Palter. He says even on this whole premise, he argues. He says even if he shechs something else for Imur Tzibur, he shechs another korban for the korban tzibur, he is also palter. Rameir holds that's also considered a Tayyib Dvar Mitzvah. Rameir holds that Tayyib Dvar Mitzvah, if he's Tayyib Dvar Mitzvah, he made a mistake while doing a mitzvah, even lo yasa mitzvah, even if he didn't end up doing a mitzvah, we still consider Tayyib Dvar Mitzvah. In this case, he argues on the very premise. He says even if someone shecht that, even though shecht l'shem, another korban, l'shem korbanos tzibur, he would also be palter. Now the Mishnah continues with other dinim of the korban Pesach. Shachta shaloilach avivi shachta korban Pesach for someone who can't eat it, so therefore the korban is possible. Ushaloila menuyev over someone who is not part of that chabura, or olay reilim utmeim for someone who was an oral, didn't have a meal, or who's tamei. So in all of these cases, the korban is possible, and therefore he's chayiv achatas. Since the korban is possible, it's a chilul Shabbos. He's chayiv achatas for chilul Shabbos. But if he shechs lo eichlav v'shlo eichlav, if he did it for both who can and can't, l'menuyev shelo l'menuyev, those who are part of the chabur and part who aren't, l'mulam l'areilim, for both mulam and areilim t'melo ta'irim, then he's potter. In these cases, he's potter. Since the korban is kosher, then there's no chiyuv. If he shech the korban Pesach and it's found to have a mum, so it's possible. Now we're talking where the mum is a visible mum. So we say over here he's chayiv because he's considered negligent. He should have been seen that there was a mum. You can't consider it Tayyib B'Dvar Mitzvah. He's not an honest. It's something that is obvious. He should have seen that and known. So he's chayiv. He's Mechal Shabbos. He's chayiv. Shachta v'nimsa treifa. If he shechted it and it turned out, however, to be a treifa, and therefore the korban is possible, b'seiser, if it's internal, it's something that was concealed and he wouldn't be able to know about it, then potter. Then he's potter. We do consider this Tayyib B'Dvar Mitzvah, and he's potter for the chilul Shabbos. If he shechted, and it turned out that after he, without knowing, he shechted it, and without knowing, it turned out that the owners, they withdrew from the chabura, so they left the chabura. So therefore, it turns out that he shechted it shaloi l'menuyev, or it turned out without him knowing that they died, or without him knowing that they were tamei, potter. Then he's potter because he shechted brishus, meaning he's considered to be an onus. He's considered to be Tayyib Dvar Mitzvah. He didn't know, and we don't consider that he should have known that the owners withdrew or that they were tamei and they died. It's something that he is not considered to be negligent if he didn't know this. So therefore, he's potter. Like the Gemara, so we have the first halacha that's mentioned in the Mishnah, that if a person shechs a korban Pesach for a different korban, then he's chayiv. and he's high for that. The korban is possible, and therefore the shlit is considered a chilul Shabbos. But Mayas Kinan, what are we dealing with over here? If the person made a mistake, he thought that this really was another korban, so he shechted the korban Pesach, really thinking that it was a different korban. So Shema Mino Akira Betos Havi Akira. So let us bring a raya from here. Let's be medayik from here that even though the person did not intentionally want to uproot it from a korban Pesach, he didn't intentionally want to change it for a different korban. And let us say that even if it was a mistake, meaning he didn't intend to change this and uproot it from a korban Pesach, he thought it was a different korban, so he shechted it for something else. So let us say that nevertheless that it's considered to be an akira and it's not a korban Pesach, it's not kosher for a korban Pesach. Let us bring a raya from here, and as Tosfos points out that this is really, it's a machlekes and menachos. So let us bring a raya from this Mishnah according to this tzad, and that an akira betos, even though it's a mistake, can have akira. Where it says no. Ela v'oiker. You can't bring any raya because we're talking in the ratio where oiker, he intentionally uprooted from a Pesach. He intentionally wanted to change it from a Pesach to a different korban. So, good morning. Well, if that's the case, we learned in the Seifa, Ushar kol hazvachim sheshachal l'shon Pesach, other korbanos that he shechted for the purpose of a korban Pesach, im ein ru'uyin chayim. If they're not suitable for korban Pesach, that they don't have the qualifications for korban Pesach, they're not a zachar ben shana, then he's chai. He's considered to be negligent. He's not tayyib dvar mitzvah. It's obvious that this is not suitable for korban Pesach, so he's chai. He's chai from B'chal Shabbos. Imru imein, but if the animal would have been suitable for korban Pesach, Rabbi Lezer mechayiv chatas, Rabbi Yeshua poit. That's the machlekes. Now, v'i be'oiker, if he is intentionally trying to uproot it, he knows that this is a different korban, and he's intentionally trying to switch it, then mali ruin, mali shein ruin. What difference does it make if it's ruin or not? But he's intentionally trying to switch it. So why should Rav Yeshua say he's potter? Ela pshita b'toya. We must say that this case is talking when he made a mistake. He didn't realize. He didn't realize that this was a different korban. So Reisha ba'ikir v'seifa b'toya. Are you going to say that the Reisha and the Seifa are talking in two different cases? The Reisha is where he did it intentionally, and the Seifa is where he's toya, where it was a mistake? Amar Rav, and he says yes. He says, yeah, Reisha ba'ikir v'seifa b'toya. You must say that. Ashkar Rav Yitzchak bar Yosel Rabawi, he encountered the Halakoi Bachlusa Dinshe. He was standing in a crowd of people. Amar Lei said, Mas Nisan Mai, how do you understand the Mishnah? Amar Lei, Reisha ba'ikir v'seifa b'toya. That's how we have to learn it. Talminei, our boy Zimni, learned it from 40 times. V'damalei command the mancha b'kis, and it was in his pocket or in his purse, meaning it was clear to him, and it was there that he would remember it that way. Tanan, we learned in the Mishnah, Amr Belezer, Ma Pesach Shemuta Lishma Hoi. Yes, the Korban Pesach, if you shacht it L'Shem Pesach, it's muter, and you can bring it on Shabbos. Kishishina es Shmoy Chayev. If you change it for another Korban, then we said you're Chayev. Zvachim Shein Asur L'Shma. Other korbanos which you cannot bring on Shabbos, Kishashina es Shemam Eina Dinchi Chayev. So he tied it that if you change it, you shecht another korban for the Pesach, certainly you should be Chayev. Now V'im Isa, if it's true that you're saying that the Reish and the Seif are talking in two different cases, V'im Isa Haloi Dami, then how can you compare it? The Reish B'Leiker, because the Reish is B'Leiker, yes, in the korban Pesach. You're allowed to shecht it on Pesach. You're allowed to shecht it rather on Shabbos for a Pesach. If you're Shina Yechayev, but there we're saying the cases where you're Oiker, where you intentionally try to shecht it for a different korban. But Seifa is B'taya. The Seifa we're saying is B'taya, is where he unintentionally shechted a different korban for the korban Pesach. So how can you bring a kasha? More says, Rabbi Lezer leishanili. Rabbi Lezer says, no, you don't have to learn the Reisha that's talking by Davke ba'Oiker. He says there's no difference whether you're Oiker or where you're not oiker, even if you're toye, he says, even if you're not oiker it, then it loses its Pesach designation. So therefore, it's not a kasha. He does not have to learn. He's not learning that the reisha is dafke ba'oikeir and the seifa is b'toye. The reisha could be also b'toye. But according to Yeshua, that there is a difference in this. Let him answer. Well, how can you compare the two? That the reisha is ba'oikeir, the seifa is b'toye. So Gemara says, and this is what Yeshua meant to say. According to me, you can't compare because reisha ba'oikeir v'seifa b'toye. So therefore, there's no comparison. But even according to you, because I'll tell you, according to you, that the reisha is talking also b'toye. But don't tell me by Pesach where Yishina Shemoyel davar ha'aser, he changed it for something which is also something which you cannot be makriv on Shabbos. Why are you comparing it to Zvachim, where he shechted at other korbanos, where he shechted for the Pesach, where he's Shina l'davar ha'moter? So therefore, it's not a kasha. So the next part of the Mishnah says, Rabbi Lezer says, the korbanos tzibur will, I'll bring you a kasha from there. Shehein mutaram lishma. If you shecht for their purpose, for the Talmud, for the Musaf, it's mutar. But if you shecht other korbanos for them, you're chayav. Well, over there, I agree with you over there, because that's considered negligent, because there's only a very limited amount of korbanos that you bring for the Talmud and Musaf. He should not have made that mistake. But by Pesach, it's not considered negligent because there's so many korbanos of Korban Pesach. It's considered to be a legitimate mistake that he confused the korbanos and he shechted another korban for the Pesach. So, you mean to say the Kol Heichadi is like Yitzah Machai Rav Yeshua? You mean to say that Rav Yeshua would agree that whenever there's a limit, he would be chai for chatas. Tinaikas yeshlam kids. In a case where you have tinaikas, you have babies to be mauled. Now the meal of the 8th day is Deicha Shabbos. Mila, if it's not bisman, if it's not the 8th day, is not Deicha Shabbos. If a person has 2 babies to maul, so there's a kids. There's a limit. He knows that there's only 1 baby that has to be mauled on Shabbos. We learned in the Mishnah, a person has 2 children to maul. One is the 8th day, is on Sunday, is after Shabbos. And the other one, the Mila, is the 8th day, is on Shabbos. So one baby is this man of Shabbos, the other one is not. And he made a mistake and he mauled the one of Sunday on Shabbos. So now that is not a mitzvah. He wasn't Mekayim the Mila, it's not the 8th day. It's not Deicha Shabbos. So he's Chai. He's Chai for being Machal Shabbos. He's Chai for that. Now, but Echad Lamula Be'erev Shabbos, if one of them, the 8th day, was on Friday, Ve'echad Lamula B'Shabbos, and the other one, the Mila, was on Shabbos, B'Shakach Hamal Eshal Erev Shabbos B'Shabbos, and he forgot, and he did the Friday baby on Shabbos. So there, it's not, Shabbos is not Nidna Litchais, he's not Deicha Shabbos, it's not the 8th day, but nevertheless, he was Mekayim the mitzvah of Mila. Rabbi Lezer says he's Chai v'chatos because it is like Nidna Litchais, so he was Mechal Shabbos, but Yeshua Paiter. But Yeshua, he's Paiter over there. He says he's Paiter because he's considered Tay B'dvar Mitzvah, but also Mitzvah. Now over there, even though there's a limit, there's only 1 baby to be Mal on Shabbos, and nevertheless, Rabbi Yeshua says, even though there's a Kitzvah, he's still Pater. Alma, Rabbi Ami says, what we're talking about over here is that he did the Mila of the Friday baby first. Because he has the Shabbos baby still to mal. So we're talking where specifically the order is that he mauled the Friday baby first. he still has the Shabbos baby to mal. So therefore, he has a mitzvah to be to do on Shabbos. He has a mitzvah that's Deicha Shabbos. So he made the mistake and therefore thought that he can do the Friday baby as well, because he still has a mitzvah to be Deicha Shabbos. Specifically in that case, he says he's potter. But if he already had mauled the Shabbos baby, and Chanami, he would agree that he's Chai v'chatos, that we wouldn't consider his Taiva Dvar mitzvah, because he doesn't have a mitzvah to do on Shabbos as Deicha Shabbos, and it's a Dover Sheyesh L'Kitzvah. There's no reason for him to think that he can maul this Friday baby, and that we wouldn't consider him to be a Tayo, we'd consider him to be negligent. But Hacha, we're talking going Shekanam Shachtin Lemur Tzibaration. But in the case where, under the discussion over here, we're talking where when he first shechted the Karbanos Sibu. So therefore, it's a Dover Sheyesh L'Kitzvah, and therefore he already shechted the Karbanos Sibu, where there's no reason for him to think that he can now be shecht the other Karbanos for the Karbanos Sibur. And therefore, there's no basis for him to make that mistake. He would be Chayiv. So, En Chanami, we have to say that we're talking dafka in that specific order. So, therefore, however, the machlekes will be in the case of the Korban Pesach. Now, we have to be talking in the case of the Korban Pesach, where similarly, we're talking where the person already shechted his own Korban Pesach. So there we have the machlekes. We say that, well, he shechted his own Korban Pesach, so why should we consider it to be Taiva Dvar Mitzvah? So nevertheless, Rabbi Yeshua says, in this case, even though he already shechted his own Korban Pesach, as opposed to the case of the Korban Tzibur, as opposed to the case of the Murei Tzibur over here, even though he was already Mekayim his own Korban Pesach, but since it's a Dover Shein L'Kitzvah, there's so many Korbanos of Pesach. So therefore, that he shechted somebody else's Korban, and he shechted another Korban for L'Shem Pesach, and made the mistake, it's a mistake that we would consider to be a mistake that's a reasonable mistake. That's a mistake that we can understand. It's an understandable mistake, and we would consider it to be Taiva Dvar Mitzvah. Because since it's a Dover Shein L'Kitzvah, there's so many Korbanos of Pesach, this would be considered to be not negligent because of the multitude of the Korban Pesach. Therefore, we consider it to be an understandable mistake. Well, if you're telling me that the case is talking specifically where they were already shechted the Korbanik Tzibur, and you're telling me that Rameir says even if he shechted other Korbanos L'Shem Korbanot Tzibur, he'd be chayiv. Afal gav the Kodem Shachtinu Le'Mur Tzibur Reisha. Would Rameir say this even if they shechted the Korban Tzibur for us? Omer Rameir, he said the name of Rameir. Lo nechlek Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Yeshua. They didn't argue. Al shoyelo shnei tinoikos. He had two babies to mal. Echad lomol erev Shabbos. One was the 8th day, was Friday. Ve'echad lomol b'Shabbos. The other one was in Shabbos. B'shalkach hu mal eshel erev Shabbos b'Shabbos. And he maled the Friday baby on Shabbos. Dechayev. That he's chayiv in such a case. Now Rashi learns that the case we're talking about is that he mauled first the Shabbos baby. Now he knew that there was an 8th day. He mauled both babies. He first mauled the Shabbos baby, then thinking that since the Shabbos is nidna litchais, because he has an 8-day-old child that is Deicha Shabbos, he thought he can also do the Friday baby. So first he did the Shabbos baby, then he did the Friday baby, then he's chayiv. Now even though he's Taiva Dvar Mitzvah, even though he's and he's also Mitzvah, but since already he was Mekayim the Mitzvah Milah B'Zmana, he's Chayiv. Alman Nachlaku, what are they arguing? Al Shahayel Shnei Tinoikos Echad Lamal Achar Shabbos V'Echad Lamal B'Shabbos. One was a Sunday baby, one was a Shabbos baby. V'Shalkach Mal Eshal Achar Shabbos B'Shabbos, and he mauled the Sunday baby on Shabbos. Now, as Rashi explains over here, he clearly knows that he only has one baby to maul, because he knows that one is an 8th day and the other one is only a 7th day baby. So he knows he only has one. So the case has to be talking over here that not that he mauled the Shabbos baby, he didn't maul the Shabbos baby, he only mauled one. The one that he did was a Sunday baby. So over here, he still has a mitzvah that's Deicha Shabbos, that's incumbent upon him. That's the Machlais Rebbe Lezer Mechayev Chatzah Rishua Paita. But Al Kopanim, we see from the first case that even though he's Toiv Dvar Mitzvah, but since he already has been Mekayim, the Milah of Shabbos, the Milah that's Deicha Shabbos, then Rabbi Yeshua agrees that you're Chayim. So you see that Rameir says that once he's Mekayim the Mitzvah, that he would be Chayim. Mar says, V'tizbra, can you really say that that's a pshat? Ma hasam delay of mitzvah Potter Rabbi Yeshua in the case where he mauled the Sunday baby on Shabbos. He didn't even do a mitzvah. And you're telling me that Rabbi Yeshua potters him, so he's told b'dvar mitzvah lo yasam mitzvah, and he's potter echad dekoavet mitzvah mechayev. In the case where he did the Friday baby on Shabbos, where Seif calls Seif, he did a mitzvah, he was mechayev the mitzvah milah. You're going to tell me yechayev? So therefore, we have to re-examine the case and say a different shot. Amri the Rabbi Yana, Reish, the Reish Gigan Shekharmu Mal Shel Shabbos, Be'er Shabbos. He made a complete mistake. He mauled the Shabbos baby on Friday. So therefore, there is no mitzvah over here incumbent on this person that's Deicha Shabbos. He has the Shabbos baby he mauled on Friday. He doesn't have an 8-day-old to maul on Shabbos. The Friday baby is not Deicha Shabbos, so there's no mitzvah upon him that's Deicha Shabbos. Shalei Nitna Shabbos Litchais. He doesn't have a mitzvah that's Deicha Shabbos, and therefore he is chayiv, even according to Rabbi Yeshua. But in the Seifa we say that Seifa Nitna Shabbos Litchais Etzloi. So Hacharei Nitna Shabbos Litchais. So it's but the Seifa is Harei Shabbos Nitna Litchais Etzloi. In the Seifa the case, there's Shabbos Nitna Litchais because he does have a Shabbos. He does have a Shabbos baby to maul. He does have a baby that's Deicha Shabbos. So therefore, even though he did the Sunday baby, he's still considered to be Toyim B'Dvar Mitzvah because he has a mitzvah upon him he has a mitzvah incumbent upon him that's Deicha Shabbos. But Hacha, in the case of the Korban Tzibur, Hacha reigned the Shabbos Litchais Eitzel Korban Tzibur. But over here, Rameir would hold that even if they were makriv the Korban Tzibur, but there is, on this Shabbos, there is a mitzvah that is Deicha Shabbos. The mitzvah of the Talmud, the Musaf is Deicha Shabbos. So therefore, even if they already were makriv it, he holds that if he was makriv a different korban for l'shem these korbanos tzibur, he still would be potter. It's still considered a type of environment. So, what do you mean? Well, even if he doesn't have an 8-day-old child, but Shabbos nitol litchais are there for other babies. Any other baby in the world, if there's an 8-day baby, is Deicha Shabbos. Omer Lei, Rav Kahana said to Rav Ashi, Legabe Dahai Gavra Mias Lo Yisyav. He said, however, as far as this person is concerned, it was not given to be Deicha, and therefore he's Chayiv. It may have been given to be Deicha for Tinaik's Dalba, but not for this person, and therefore he's Chayiv.